Okay, let's start. It's 2 minutes past 4. Welcome everyone attending the meeting. We just started the recording, so the meeting will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards. Welcome to our 15th WMUG Tuesdays webinar. We are organizing these webinars on a regular basis because of the whole COVID-19 crisis. Normally we would have on-premises meetings as well, but yeah, due to the circumstances that isn't possible. An advantage of the webinars though is that we are able to attract speakers from outside of the Netherlands. And well, today we have Alex Verboon, introduce himself later on, and he's going to give a talk about improving your security posture, and yeah, he will discuss some challenges as solutions. Probably, as I know Alex, from the field, so that will be very interesting. But before we go to Alex, I first want to notice that we have, of course, some sponsors. Because of those sponsors, yeah, we can actually host these kind of meetings. So a big thanks to our sponsors. Further on, we are of course available on social media. We will share the slides, but yeah, if you would like to send out a tweet or something, please use the hashtag WMUG_NL. And you're going to go to our website, but it will actually end up in our meetup channel, and you can then subscribe to our group, and you will be notified if there are any other meetups going on. We would like to ask you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we can actually make the URL you are seeing now a little bit better. But before we can do that, we need a couple of subscribers to actually help us out there. Last but not least, if you are interested in speaking at our user group, please, we invite you to actually submit a session using Sessionize. The URL is in here. Do submit a session. If you're not really comfortable with presenting on your own, we can help you with that as well. We can maybe team with you, but we really want to provide a platform where you feel comfortable to speak on a topic where you know a lot about. And then, let's try it, why not? And yeah, we really want to invite you to submit sessions on our Sessionize page. Actually, that leaves it for my presentation. So I want to hand over the presentation to Alex. Alex has some Dutch roots, dus welcome Alex. We are going to do the presentation in English, but I'll give the presentation to Alex, who will introduce himself. The floor is yours, Alex.
Okay, thank you. Good. So first of all, thanks for having me. As you mentioned, one of the positive things about COVID is that we get more to speaking events even abroad. So I almost feel home. Yeah, I'd like to repeat, thanks for the sponsors. Being a session organizer myself, I know how hard it is to actually get sponsorship. So greatly appreciated for the continuous support, even though we're having those virtual events. So a little bit about me. So yeah, as you can figure from my last name with the double O, I have my roots in the Netherlands. I was actually born there in The Hague, Scheveningen, and later moved on to Switzerland in my childhood already. In terms of IT, yeah, a typical crossover starter in the early 90s, DOS, Windows 3.1, Oracle, Novell, you know, these were the things we used to do without really having a specific specialization. But then later, in the end of the 90s, after leaving my first employer, ABB, I actually had a chance to join digital. So I can still call myself an ex-digital employee, although it was only for 3 months, merged with Compaq and later merged with HB. During that time, I had actually a fantastic time. I've seen many customers. I also had the opportunity that actually my company was paying for my trips back home to the Netherlands, as I spent quite some time on various projects in the Netherlands, such as Rijkswaterstaat, Heineken, and Gasunie. So that was always a pleasure. After nearly 17 years, I thought it's time to move on. So I spent 5 years at Swiss Re as the head of workplace product integration, which basically is responsibility for the architecture of their workplace. I helped them moving to Office 365 and did a Windows 10 migration with them. But then I thought, you're never too old to change. So I had seen it a little bit, and I thought I'm up to something new, because in the most recent years, my interest had moved a little bit from the typical workplace management more into the direction of security. And I think with the background in workplace management and my new skills that I obtained in security, I noticed already at my former employer that I can easily combine them, not only technically, but also actually bringing the people together, understanding what hurts workplace guys, and usually it's always like, security, they're a pain in the butt because, they don't allow this and that. So I often acted as a facilitator. And that's why in 2018, I joined Base Vision, back then a small consultancy firm based in Switzerland. Most of our customers are also based in Switzerland, but do of course have global reach. And there I started to basically build up the security practice. And I'm now there since 2 years and having a lot of fun. In addition, I earned some awards and recognitions. Most fun actually this year was when we started the Workplace Ninja Summit, which was originally planned to be a live event, but we then quickly had to change everything over to a virtual event, but was great fun. We had a lot of participants from all over the world. And yes, like many of us, I'm active in Twitter, LinkedIn, GitHub, or on my blog, where I write. And yes, I'm married with 2 children who already left the house. So I have a lot of time with my wife or for my personal interests, which is mainly around security, PowerShell, and IT stuff. So quite boring. Good. Improving your security posture, challenges and solutions. So I thought I'm not going to give a product demo because actually we see so many of them, and I think by now everyone knows or hopefully should know what is conditional access, what is cloud app security. If you have the opportunity in your company and maybe you work in a Microsoft-minded company, you're even exposed to some of the security solutions from Microsoft. So I thought, I'm currently working on a couple of projects, and it doesn't always have to be that very deep dive thing, because let us remind, while we are all the geeks and we spend a lot of time in most companies that I visit, most IT people have to look after a lot of things, and very often they don't actually have the time to go into every detail. But also sometimes the solution for a challenge, can be quite simple or pragmatic. And here in Switzerland, I always say, I'm Dutch, so I'm a pragmatic guy. I don't need to, spend a half year writing a paper until we are going to do something. So I picked a couple of use cases that I've done recently, and I hope you will enjoy that. So the first topic is actually an eye on device local groups and users. And Why is that important? Because in terms of security, we look at lateral movement. So when the bad guys come in, it's way easier, to maybe hack a local account, because in most cases that's just a quick and dirty created account. It was maybe created for some testing, or because someone, is not official local admin, so he sneaking his own account while he was supported, or he temporarily gained administrative rights. And from a security perspective, that is of course a problem. And in an ideal world, we have no local admins at all, or if we have that, we use labs, or for people that permanently use that, at least we know who has those rights. Nevertheless, in larger companies, when you take a close look, and this is also always the mind opener, when I show my customers that have, for example, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint deployed, how easy it is to actually detect the creation of local user accounts and what they do with those. So within Microsoft Defender, we actually have a possibility to gather device events. So unlike traditional Windows event logging, Microsoft Defender itself has already a large amount of activities and events that it will identify by itself. So to make this a little bit more also of a real demo, let me quickly show you what I mean by that. If we go to the table device events here, and here we have device events, and then we look at action types. So here you have, a huge list of, specific activities that can occur on your device. So one of them is actually, that a user account has been created. So when we run that, in an environment, we will see this. I actually took from a customer the other day, actually a couple of days ago. And you see, scanner, local accounts, test, Gila, whatever, and yeah, I mean, local account is okay, but if they then become also a local admin, that is not okay. So I actually expanded the query a little bit to actually get some more information, because I'm primarily interested in, okay, user accounts that were created, but by whom? Because normally we don't have that information. We only have the information within Defender ATP on the local machine of the object ID of the account who created this user. So that object ID is a long string, a unique ID in your Active Directory. So that's why I first actually do a lookup here in the identity info table, which is a table that we get when we have Microsoft 365 deployed in our environment. I create a unique list of all users and their SID. And then I actually going to look for, okay, were there any accounts added to a local group where the account name is actually the administrators. And then I'm going to move further, and actually find out, okay, who was the actor that actually, added that account. So here is the full query of that. So again, we pull the identity info, we check for any local accounts, we check for any groups that are being added. Now later I improved that, because in an international environment you cannot work with the term administrator, because if you go to Italy or in Switzerland, where people have 4 languages, French, I almost said Dutch, but French, German, Italian, and English, that query will not work. So we have to use the SID, and then I'm actually going to find out the actor. So who added that user? And then we get the following result. We basically see, the device, we see the local group administrators. Unfortunately, I had to blur out the names to protect my customers. But here I highlighted, 2 accounts, VPN test, And the actor, in this column, we would see actually the human readable name of the person who created that. So let me quickly show you that in my demo environment, how that looks. Here we have one that I just prepared today. So we see remote desktop users was modified. And we see the actor was here. It was the account L-admin, which is my domain admin. And we here even had also on this device the user Java, which is the name of a dummy user in my AD. So yeah, this is an easy way how to detect those activities, and of course, either speak to your local IT guys or to your admins, and kindly ask them to stop doing so, to not violate your corporate policies. Good. Now that we talked about local groups, even more important is actually, what happens with my privileged groups in Active Directory. These are sensitive groups that I want to keep an eye on. So in this case, what I built, first of all, a simple monitoring approach, leveraging again Microsoft 365 Defender, which is the umbrella for Microsoft Security Portfolio. And within there, we have Microsoft Defender for Identity, formerly known as Azure Advanced Threat Protection, or even further down the road, it was called Advanced Threat Analytics, which was the on-prem version. So the objective of actually monitoring privileged groups here is to, first of all, be transparent on the groups that are sensitive, what changes are being made there. But also, I want to show you, and right now, I have to be honest, this is more a proof of concept, which I'm discussing with the customer, which will probably require some more fine tuning. But the idea is also that we can actually respond to a potential not legitimate change that was made. So imagine a domain user, a domain admin gets hacked, and with that account, other users are being made domain admin. And if that happens at a certain time of the day or a weekday, we can actually trigger an action. So this is the full query. And let me quickly walk you through that one before I'm going to demonstrate it. First of all, we define legitimate admins. So in this case, user admin. Then we define all the sensitive groups. So these are all typical groups that we know. The list is actually longer, but due to the screenshot. And then I also added the possibility to actually add a regular AD group. So if you have groups, where you also have stuff included that's sensitive, you can include that as well. And then we're monitoring basically for group membership change. And then we are going to pull out the actor, so the person that actually made the change. And I will show you this thing about the additional fields attribute in a second. Good. Then I do a little bit of a transformation of the data because this additional fields is a large field with a lot of properties in JSON format. So in order to make it more readable, I'm basically pulling out all the information. But for those of you who have worked already with the schema, you will notice that depending on the activity, the information stored in the additional fields can be different. So let me give you an example. If I add a user, then I have the target here. But if I remove a user, then it's like from group. So that's why we have to add some logic to actually normalize the data. And then I'm basically doing a lookup again, and I'm going to compare that information and in the very end, we'll tell you, who has been added and removed. And I'm doing a lookup whether the actor, so the account that actually made the change, is actually a member of this legitimate group or not. So the result looks then as following. But again, as long as my demos work, let me show you that in real. So here, of course, I just prepared this afternoon to make sure everything is working. So here we see schema admins, L admin, and this is not a legitimate actor because he's not defined here. As you see, it's admin and not L admin. So this is a non. So if I quickly remove this time ago, which just a look back, I actually now get a nice overview of, okay, the operation that happened in Active Directory, whether it was a move, remove, or an add operation, the AD group affected, who did it, and who was actually added. So I'm using my son's first name here as a dummy user. So this is an easy way. Now, that's good if we have that, but let's now add some automation. So in Microsoft Defender for identity, what I actually can do, I can actually create a custom rule, a custom detection. So that's this one. Let me quickly go to edit. So I can say, okay, sensitive group change. Run this every hour. Giving alert title, severity is high. I add some categories for those familiar with the MITRE attack. I can even select some tactics here. So that will be helpful for a security operations team or whoever is looking at security in your company. And next, I say, okay, I'm interested in the impacted identity user. And next, I actually want to do something with that user. I want to mark that user as compromised. So the user that has been added to this group will be marked as compromised. So when I run that query, let me quickly go to Active Directory. And here's my RDP problem again when I have Teams open. Let's make him a domain admin. And of course, this is not going to be super real time, but I get back to this in a few seconds. And then we will actually see, that this user was added. And for now, you just have to believe my slides. What actually will happen is when it runs the detection, it will, of course, find a result. And what it then does, it will mark the user as compromised in Azure AD. And that would then look as following. Like if we go to Azure AD identity protection and look under risky users, that user is then being automatically marked. And we will then also, if we were to go into your user risk detections, we will get a list that would say, okay, admin confirmed user as risky. Okay, let me quickly try if that works instantly, and if not, I'm just gonna. Yeah, it should work. It's the time now. So here we see that it actually completed the activity. Here we see the action. It was submitted. So if the demo gods are with me, And I now go into the identity protection. And of course, I should have shown you before that the user was not yet compromised. Okay, but it's not there yet immediately. Yeah, hope you will believe me. It will now show up as a compromised user. Good. My next case, the unsupported browser Chrome that we can't uninstall. So yeah, this might sound like an unreasonable story, but yeah, I think everybody who has been in work life knows that sometimes, you know, even us ourselves, but also our customers sometimes have reasons we can't understand, but you know, we have to stop discussing and then, you know, find a solution. At least that's my opinion as a consultant, that whether you always agree or not with people, you know, if they have something in mind and it's not an absolutely nuts idea, which I'm never afraid of telling people, but nevertheless, you know, find a solution. So in this case, customer declared, you know, our default browser is Edge, Edge Chromium, but he declared this without actually having Edge Chromium deployed or everywhere. So far, people could basically use whatever they wanted. So they had Google Chrome, they had Firefox, whatever. Despite the fact that they used Chrome, they had not installed the Windows 10 account extension. So users were always doing a sign-in. And now that they start to roll out conditional access and MFA, they're running into some troubles and have quite some complaints. So our solution that we actually proposed is, well, you know, get rid of Chrome, then we have the problem solved, and make sure we can roll out Edge Chromium as quick as possible. Yeah, good. But yeah, the customer is afraid of you know, customer complaints and users, and this goes all too fast. So we have been thinking a little bit. And first of all, we actually had to tell the customer, the head of IT, that he was wrong in assuming that everybody is already using Edge Chromium. So we created this little query here, and in this query, we basically see how many people are actually still using Chrome. Or if you want, you can expand that to Firefox like I did here. And basically see, you know, the amount of people that are still accessing Microsoft Online services. So these are the typical service endpoints for logging on or going to OneDrive or the company SharePoint portal. So in this case, out of 1,500 users, we noticed it actually, or it's actually nearly 2,000, I see here. Yeah, 389 people are still frequently, you know, using the so-called unsupported browser to access corporate information. So the idea that we came up, which is still in a proof of concept mode, but is basically to leverage conditional access and Microsoft Cloud App Security session control. So what we're basically doing, we're creating a conditional access policy in which we include all the users in the first instance that we know of that are using you know, the Chrome browser. And then we create a custom policy, and then we move on to Cloud App Security. And in Cloud App Security, we basically, again, define a group of users. So we have to import that group into Cloud App Security. Then to make it easy, we basically are just looking for if the user agent string is not EDG, so which stands for Edge. Of course, this is all spoofable and can be bypassed. But for the regular user that, you know, unintentionally is launching Chrome to access Office 365 services, you know, they will get actually the following message where we kindly inform them they should please start using Edge Chromium. So again, I hope to share some more details on the outcome of this. We're still having some challenges because we have to further fine-tune this policy to only affect corporate devices, so hybrid joint devices, which is possible. We can add a device tag for hybrid joint here as well, because of course we cannot tell people at home what they should use or not use for now. Good. My next topic actually has become a very famous topic in the last 3 weeks. I got one new customer I hadn't dealt with before, but he was so desperate, and he was routed to us, and that was related to my costs are out of control. Now, in this case, it was all around Azure Log Analytics and Sentinel. Then a week later, I had yet another existing customer who pushed some buttons wrong. So yeah, I mean, the challenge that the companies are facing, and I think, you know, on-premise in the on-premise days, maybe you created a full disk, and that was the biggest problem, or you consume too many CPU reserve services from your on-premise data center. But when it comes to cloud, it can become an expensive topic, like getting the unexpected Azure billing at the end of the month. So common mistakes that I see that people are making, you know, it's all very easy. That's how also sales tells us, right? We can onboard services within minutes and not within weeks. But yeah, always, you know, be careful and read the small letters about, you know, when those trials are going to end, and actually what is happening after a trial. Another issue that I see when the left doesn't talk with the right, in the event of forwarding event logs or performance data into log analytics, you know, you can easily, you know, create a very lot of data. Yeah, if you are working with those services, you know, it's unfortunately not always the case that people are actually paying attention to their log usage. So in the first example of the customer, you know, they had turned on Azure Sentinel back in August, played a little bit with it, and totally forgot that they actually had deployed some agents on some servers. So the solution for that is, you know, review your log usage on a frequent basis. And for that, I actually want to introduce a Azure Sentinel Health Workbook, which I found in the gallery of Azure Sentinel on GitHub. But yeah, this is, you know, when you get a phone call from someone, a regular IT guy like you and me, who is totally desperate, and the boss comes to his office and says, hey, why do we have a bill of 15,000, in this case, Swiss francs? And, you know, imagine this is not a large enterprise where maybe this is funny money. You know, this is a mid-sized, in Dutch we say bouwvakkersbedrijf. I don't find the English word, but, you know, with 10 people in IT, and yeah, suddenly they get a bill of 15,000 bucks. And first of all, they didn't even know where it was coming from. Yeah. Another example here is when someone is just, you know, tweaking agents, and you see here how suddenly event logs, you know, has going up, because initially Azure Sentinel was only configured to actually consume Office 365 data, but suddenly, you know, some domain controllers were added. So before we go into the details, first recommendation, when you play with Log Analytics or Azure Sentinel, you know, configure a daily cap, and you know, configure that daily cap so that it actually meets your budget. You know, if you're doing a proof of concept or a demo, you know, what I usually even do, being so careful, is I just put it to 1 gigabyte. You know, whenever I onboard customers in their first experimental days with Azure Sentinel, where we're just, you know, collecting signing logs and those sort of things. You know, I put it to 1 gigabyte. If you exceed that gap, you will get an alert anyway, and then you can slowly, move up and adjust the cap to your normal average usage. Yeah. And if we're moving into production, if you can really demonstrate the added value of it, I've seen actually customers having no problem, that they get maybe a bill for $1,000 or $2,000 a month, but you really have to show the added value of it. So another area to stay in control, because basically everyone who knows your log analytics primary key, can install an agent and attach it and start forwarding event logs. And maybe you have multiple log analytics workspaces, and suddenly your agents start to send data into 2 workspaces or in your own one. So in this case, we took a look and we saw, okay, there's 18 Windows computers connected. So everything fine. These were the domain controllers. But then we found out, and it's always like, I didn't do that. It was someone else. But we found out that this was configured to all events. So configure all the events here, which in the Azure Sentinel workspace is actually in a different location as when you work with Azure Security Center. So let me quickly show you where that is. That is, by the way, a second challenge for people not, living in this portal every day to actually find things, which is fully understandable. So yeah, data connectors. And then we go to the security events, which are the old school Windows event logs. And when I click here, I will see here common all events. And yeah, when I click all events, it really means all events. So every Windows event log, is being sent into my log analytics workspace. By the way, for those interested, what does all and common and medium mean? Because even after 3 years, Microsoft is still posting event ID numbers on their blog post and documentation, but not what they mean. So a good time ago, I actually extracted those event IDs to give it a little bit more of a detail so that you know what is included in all and common or in small. Good. So first of all, we changed this to common because there was a third-party SOC provider in place who claimed that he needs everything. So then we took a look, and we saw some spikes. And let's see if we find a pattern. So with a few quick queries on the security event table, first of all, summarize count by event ID. So you get a nice number, and hey, wow, this is a very large number for only 1,500 users environment. So then we drilled this down to the target account, which of course I had to blur here, but then we could actually pinpoint this to one user account. Now, interesting enough, when we brought this up, suddenly someone on the call knew that that person was actually already disabled about 1.5 weeks ago. And that was exactly when this started. So to keep the story short, the problem was that unfortunately this user was apparently, and I'm still interested myself to find the details, but he was still having an open session in some sort of a virtual machine. And once they rebooted that system, those events, went down. So bottom line, keep an eye on what's happening in your event logs or in your log analytics spaces, because it can become quite expensive. So here you see numbers from the problematic account. So this goes into the 10,000s. And this is, just the statistics, the same query of a normal user account for the same event. Good. So running all those queries, of course, is a little bit painful, and nobody has time for that. So that's why I would also like to introduce you to the Azure Sentinel Health Workbook, which can be very helpful. So first of all, how to get that workbook? Simply go here to this GitHub page. Then maybe have a look if this is not the GitHub page, this is the article, but we simply go here and then maybe have a look here under KQL workbooks, and you will find always a newer version somewhere here. Workspace usage, here we go. So this one, open that, open it in raw mode, copy paste it, and basically you say, okay, create a new workbook, paste the code of the workbook into the template, click apply, give it a name, and then basically you have the workbook. So let's take a look at the workbook in my small demo world. Here we go. So what does the workbook tell me? Well, first of all, I can easily, select my workspace. I can select the number of days, so I can see for the last 24 hours, or I can simply select for the last, 28 days and more. Oops. Come on. Yeah. Okay. So here I see actually the size of my tables. And of course, this is peanuts in this environment because this is my live environment. So we're only talking megabytes. But as you saw before, in a real enterprise or even in a mid-sized company, we're talking gigabytes here. So here I can easily see, which tables are consuming the most data. Now, in terms of costs, I can click here. And this is also how we found out, in addition to the queries that we run, where is the noise coming from? So in this case, we see security event, 15 megabytes. And if I drill down here, I can go again. I see, okay, security event, and I here see also the event descriptions. And then I basically can find, maybe deviations from normal operation if something goes terribly wrong in my environment. So yeah, strongly recommend. Also recently it was added some best practice, on daily checks that you should do, weekly checks, and monthly. So I leave it with that, but yeah, if you are using Azure Sentinel or Log Analytics workspaces, I strongly recommend, to make use of the workspace usage report. And yeah, I always get the question, Azure Sentinel, is it expensive? Well, as a consultant, I have to use that phrase, it depends. But if you are only ingesting, first of all, a couple of services are free from Microsoft, which you see here, is billable, is false, so all Office activity is free. Security alerts is free, which is basically the alerts that are coming from Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. And then, yeah, signing logs and audit logs, you have to pay, but I can tell you, most of my customers are in exactly this size. And interesting enough, it can vary from 15 euros per month to maybe 40, depending on the Office activity mainly. Because signing activity, is usually quite stable. So yeah, it really only then becomes expensive when you start uploading raw event logs from individual devices. But otherwise, give it a try, add the daily cap, monitor your workspace, and you should be fine. Good. Next topic. I was working for the bank, and they are slowly getting opened to the cloud, slowly but steadily. And yeah, developers, want app registrations. We all create those. But the question came up, how to monitor those. Now, first of all, I'm not going to go into the big length of this topic itself, because Thijs actually did last month already in this session. So basically the solution is, leverage Azure AD and Azure Sentinel. So this is something, a fake conversation that I set up, but basically to show how things happen in the real world actually, right? Developer asks an admin, to create an app registration, passes on the password, and trusts that that password or client secret will be stored safely. Of course, in an ideal world, we would use, Azure Vault storage and whatever. But this is how normal things also work in our daily life. Not every company is yet there where they have, an Azure Vault set up and all those sort of things. It really depends on the maturity. So what we actually want to do is we want to know and stay in control where that API access is happening from. How we do that? First of all, we leverage again the Azure Sentinel connector. But we have to go one step further. We actually have to go into the diagnostic settings of Azure Active Directory, where as soon as we have this connector enabled, it will actually create an entry here in the diagnostic settings. I click on Edit Settings, and then I get exposed to some more options where I now can also select Service Principal logging. So by doing so, I can actually create a query. Now, in this case, I created a query that's an IP address that I expect where those calls are coming from. So if now I am going to run this very same query from my PowerShell script from my VM that's actually hosted in Amsterdam, that is not a legitimate location. So the result will be that, running this query, that here I see all the locations where this was run. And of course, this screenshot was made a few weeks ago, but we see, this service principal, was active in the Netherlands. It was active in Switzerland, but, definitely not in the location where I'm located. So I created a rule called someone use my API in Azure Sentinel, and that runs, like any other analytics rule. And that means, I get nice incidents whenever that API is used, outside of where I want it to run. So that's one way. And of course, in a real world, we are not going to hard code IP addresses there, but are most likely going to make use of the recently introduced watch list feature in Azure Sentinel, where I could basically, populate my corporate IP addresses into a list that I then only have to maintain there, and I don't have to touch the source code of my query. Good. Next example, when we help our customers onboard, what we want to do is really make sure that they get of what they are paying for. And I noticed, at least in my little world, that not all admins or people that are dealing with Azure Identity are aware of the fraud alert option that we have in Azure AD. So I usually recommend to enable it, and of course it requires that we inform users what to do with it, and then that we monitor those fraud alerts, and ideally also set up some processes, so that something actually happens. Because the problem is we can enable that, which is the first option here, but the second one is a little bit of I would call it a heavy configuration. I mean, unless you really have 24/7 coverage and you always have someone around who can help out the customer, if you enable, blocking the user, that's going to be a challenge. So let's look for a kind of medium solution. That is what my customer was looking for. So how does this work? If I have this enabled, I get an MFA prompt on my mobile phone, and I can click on deny. And when I have fraud alert enabled, I actually can click on report fraud. So the result is when I run a query, let me quickly do that. Here's a combined one, which basically looks for both situations. And here I see, okay, MFA was denied. Let me quickly sort that by date. Or it was reported as fraud. Of course, when you create this one, I here excluded another account to not have false positives. And again, we use Azure Sentinel. We create an analytics rule that will trigger, based on denying is maybe not as such of a problem as fraud alert. Now, with fraud alert, as I mentioned before, blocking the user entirely, might be a little bit of a problem. But the cool thing is in Azure Sentinel, I can also either manually trigger a playbook or even automatically trigger a playbook. So when I do so manually, I basically, get my list of my playbooks and I can run those. And here I am again making use of someone else's work. But why reinvent the wheel if someone else already provided you with the ingredients? So I have no shame on that. Actually, Nicola from Microsoft, from the Azure CAT team, he has created this confirm AD risk user playbook. So having imported that, and as always with those playbooks, it needs a little bit of time because even when you deploy them with this nice button here, you always have to customize them so that they work because of all the connections that are required. But once you get them working, the result is as following: the playbook will run, and again, he will mark my user as compromised. And because now I have also set up a conditional access policy. A conditional access policy. Because for those not aware, in the past we had the following, or it's still there actually, but we now have some nice options since a couple of months. So in the past we only had the option here, to create a user risk policy. Or a signing risk policy, but that was really kind of an all or nothing approach. But the good thing is that now those things are also available in conditional access. So I can basically simulate the same scenario, and that means I can also create different policies, maybe depending on the importance or the vulnerability of a user. So in this case, I can say conditions, and what we see here, I also have user risk, and I can also say, require a password change. So I'm basically simulating the normal old school user policy. So that means when this user is tapping on fraud alert, next time he will have to actually change his password. Which is something that he can do himself, so he's not entirely blocked, but he's requested to change his password. Good. Actually, when you look into your tenant at all the possible MFA related information that you get out of the signing logs, here's a listing of all the possible entries. So depending on your use cases and authentication methods that you have allowed in your environment, you might also want to look at other things to monitor and to respond upon. Last but not least, all those error codes are not always easy to understand. So if we quickly, let me go here, yeah, the 500121, we actually see a description. So whenever you have an error code and you don't know what it is, it's coming from Microsoft Cloud Services, simply go to login.microsoftonline.com/error, typing the number. Now, I was curious a while ago, how many error numbers are there? So I wrote a little PowerShell script. It ran for about 6 hours. And let's not all hammer Microsoft. I even included a pause into every request. And I got up to 40,000 event IDs. So I will, in a coming blog post, share those with the list. It's quite interesting to see, what type of error codes they are and how they are organized. Good. That's that one. Too many users in Azure AD. So again, infrastructure hygiene, cleaning up things. This again, a new case with a customer that has kind of grown into Office 365, I call it. They started small and suddenly before they knew it, they were fully rolling into Office 365 Azure, but unfortunately never really thought about governance and tried a lot of things themselves by try and error. But the result of that was also that they basically were syncing all their on-prem identities from Active Directory into Azure AD. And once you have that stuff over there, it can become quite messy to start cleaning it up. So what we did here, first of all, we were looking at all the users that are not licensed because they were the low-hanging fruit. Now the problem is in the Azure AD portal, I can only look back for 30 days, and that's not always enough. So again, Azure Sentinel or Log Analytics to the rescue with Azure Active Directory connected and with the log retention that I can configure up to 2 years if I want it. I can look back a little bit longer. So here's a demo, from my own environment to demonstrate it here because I cannot show you the customer's tenant, but basically you see, okay, I can go back more than 30 days. So because I don't want to hard code all those unlicensed users, we basically import those users into a so-called watch list. So that's a feature in preview in Azure Sentinel where I can basically import any kind of CSV file into my Azure Sentinel, and it will then be accessible like any other table. So you can import whatever you want. So in addition to IOCs, so indicators of compromise, like IP addresses and URLs, I can import usernames. If I wanted, I could import the daily price of the cheese. Yeah. Good. So again, creating a query using my watch list as a reference, and then are basically looking for sign-ins. Now I have excluded those sign-ins because even if a user is logging on from a hybrid joint device, of course, that will also count as a sign-in, even though he's not really accessing any, cloud services like Office 365 or SharePoint or whatever. So that's why I excluded those Windows sign-in attempts. So the result is as following, as we see here, unlicensed users, but somehow still, trying or accessing Microsoft Online Services. So the option here is either license them and bring them into the normal scope of users, or start excluding them. So that was how we started tackling the cleanup of this environment. Good, and I think that's my last one. Here, big problem, users forwarding mail. So we have great possibilities to actually block the creation of mail forwarding rules. Actually, this summer also Microsoft by default, is doing some additional things here. But nevertheless, we cannot stop people from sending individual emails. I mean, it would not be very practical or quite disruptive if we just, do not allow to forward to Gmail and Hotmail, because we might still do business with companies that maybe use such email addresses. But the problem that we have seen, and I'm yet, because I'm a fan of statistics, but I'm yet to prove that, is that since the pandemic, we see more and more people finding all sorts of creative ways so they can stay in business and continue to work. And unfortunately, not all companies, have those nice VI solutions available. So what we actually saw with a couple of companies is that the amount of emails being sent home has quite increased. So we need to do some awareness here. Now, sending an email to all employees is not very effective. You really have to directly, go to those people that are potentially those that are sending most emails. So here another query, again, leveraging Microsoft 365 Defender. In this case, we're leveraging Microsoft 365 Defender, those new names, for Office 365, as it's called now, formerly known as Office ATP. And in there, we can easily, look for all the incoming and outgoing emails. So I went out to the internet. I, was looking for some of the most famous free web services all over the world, put them into a list, and then basically ran the below query here. And as we can see, it's quite significant. If you compare this with the daily email flow of regular email. And then again, find those users that are, sending a lot of email to private email, and work with them, and inform them that they actually might violate the corporate policy, especially when they're, sending sensitive information. And of course, this solution is for companies that are not yet, at the level of DLP and data leakage prevention and you name it. Good. Oh, this is really my last one, I think. Scale devices in AD. So many scale devices in Active Directory, an old topic, but I am not getting tired to repeat it. We also have to be aware. We always have new people in our industry, young people, that maybe don't have that experience or don't have that eye to look at those things. So yeah, scale devices is really a problem. I think every company does compliance, patch compliance. So when you run patch compliance over an environment where you have many scale devices, of course, you can create in whatever solution you use, endpoint manager collections that exclude those devices. But in my view, that's more of a workaround. What we really should do is, move those devices away out of the production area, and then last but not least, delete them. Now, that's always a hard topic because nobody wants to do that. So first of all, create awareness. I asked this customer, about his Windows 7 machines, and they told me, oh, we already migrated 4 years ago to Windows 10. And then my response was, why do you still have so much? So this is not just Windows 7, but about 1/3 of this number were Windows 7 machines that were still lingering around in Active Directory. So if you are working for a company, run this query and have a look how things look in your environment. Now, in the next step, what I did, and I'll share those scripts later separately, but basically, this is a move script. So it basically moves all the found computer objects into a dedicated OU. So the idea is basically, agree, when you consider something as stale, right? 30 days might be a little bit too short. Also think about the people that are on paid leave or on a longer holiday. So maybe 90 days or 120 days. That really depends on your environment. identify those, move them out, into a dedicated still device OU, whatever. And ideally, you would even disable those accounts so that even if someone would turn it on, you want to know that if there's a living box in that still device OU. And then ideally, after a while, really delete them. And for me, that's really part of, infrastructure hygiene and housekeeping, because as a final word, we can throw many very cool solutions and also expensive solutions into every environment, but it doesn't help, when the underlying basics, aren't followed and aren't being put into practice. Good. With that, I conclude my presentation. I hope that some of you found some of the topics interesting. And if there's any questions, feel free to ask. And otherwise, I would hand it back to the moderator.
Yeah, that would be me then. Okay. Well, thanks, Alex, for this interesting talk. I have been monitoring the meeting chat, but we didn't receive any questions. I want to propose that we keep the meeting open for maybe 1 minute so that people have the chance to ask any questions. If you do have a question, you can also unmute yourself and ask the question to Alex directly. And that's basically it. So let's wait for 1, maybe 2 minutes, Alex, and then we can close up.
Okay, thank you for those comments. Always very encouraging. It's actually a downside, if you stand in front of a room, you can read the faces a little bit. You see how many people are looking into their mobile phones. That's the challenge of the virtual events.
So Alex, you will share your slides with us as well, will you?
Yeah, I will definitely do a second screen check just to double check that I have no company names in there.
Of course. Yeah.
But then and I'll also post. I actually planned this to do so. I promised this in every speaking session, but I will, for my Dutch friends, promise to do so in the next week to actually put all my session content on GitHub, including some of the scripts that I demonstrated here.
Yeah, great. Hey, I see no questions popping up, so I actually want to wrap up this WMUG webinar. For the people attending, we have recorded the meeting. You will receive a follow-up email with all the details of this meeting, but also all the other meetings we already had. We will post the session on our YouTube channel, and we will probably announce the next WMUG webinar soon. So, and last but not least, big thanks to our sponsors. And I want to wish you all a good evening, and thanks for attending.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.